What's up everybody, Andrew Mahone here with Derium's Competitive Pokemon. Today we're going to be doing a top 10 list of the best cards that are being rotated out of standard format. Rotation goes into effect in September after the World Championships here, so we're going to be doing a rundown of the 10 cards that we're going to miss most in standard format after rotation. So to start things off, I have a few honorable mentions. First on the honorable mention list is Silent Lab. Silent Lab is a stadium card that makes it so that each basic Pokemon in play or in each player's hand or discard pile, the abilities don't work. So Silent Lab was used in lots of decks in the last couple years. Notably was used alongside Seismitoad back when Seismitoad EX was legal, but also saw some play in Disruption decks, in those Sylveon decks that kind of saw a marginal amount of play in the last 6 months or so. Silent Lab has been a good card and will be missed. Another stadium for the honorable mentions, we have T-Magra's Secret Base. T-Magra's Secret Base was used to place 20 damage onto your own bench Pokemon in order to power up Drampa GX's powerful Berserk attack. T-Magra's Secret Base will no longer be an option for players looking to power up Drampa's Berserk attack, so they'll have to rely on other strategies, probably like Rainbow Energy, which was another popular strategy. And finally, for the honorable mentions, we have Double Dragon Energy was used alongside Giratina EX, most notably to use that Chaos Wheel attack very quickly. Double Dragon Energy and Double Colorless Energy could quickly power up that Dragon Pokemon's attacks, and for the World Championships, this Double Dragon Energy will also be legal to be played with a Noivern GX, but will only be legal for the World Championships as Double Dragon Energy is rotating out. Now on to the top 10. The 10th spot was very hard for me to decide, and I was very close to shuffling in any of those honorable mentions into the 10th spot, but my 10th spot had to go to Skyfield. Skyfield was used in Mega Rayquaza decks, it was used in Volcanion decks, and it was used in Raichu decks in order to expand the player's bench up into eight spots so they could have 8 bench Pokemon to launch powerful attacks. I mean, it was used in Mega Ray for that Emerald Break attack, it was used for Raichu, Circle Circuit, but then was used in decks like Volcanion just because with Hoopa EX, you wanted to be able to get lots of Pokemon EX and spread your bench out as far as possible, and Skyfield allowed players to do that. So now, in standard format, players will be limited to their 5 bench Pokemon. Up at number 9, we have Mega Rayquaza EX, was a powerful deck that was able to, it won Canadian Nationals. It also just had a lot of very competitive placings throughout its career. And even though it was easily countered by Pokemon like Giratina and it was easily countered by Parallel City, Mega Rayquaza still saw a lot of success winning state championships as well during its career. Night March kind of held Mega Rayquaza at bay just because of that lightning weakness, but Mega Rayquaza with that Emerald Break attack was kind of the one-hit KO EX Pokemon of the last couple years. So Mega Rayquaza is out. We also have Vespiquen on the way out with that Be Revenge attack. Vespiquen went on tear this year and was able to win a regional championship and finish in the top 8 of many other regional championships this year. Just that Be Revenge attack, being able to do 10 more damage, 20 plus 10 more damage for each Pokemon in your own discard pile, even with Karen being released, even with cards like Oricorio, which countered Vespiquen, Vespiquen still managed to place very highly throughout the course of the year and was a very strong deck in its own right. Next, we have Teammates. Teammates was used in Night March last year. It was also used in Zoroark decks and Garbodor decks, and was just used to help streamline attackers. With Pokemon that go down quickly, Teammates was the go-to card to help stream those attacks and get what you need out of your deck. Every time a Pokemon got knocked out, you could play Teammates during your turn in order to select 2 cards out of the deck. Very useful card, and it will be missed. Up next, we have Forest of Giant Plants coming in at the 6th spot. Forest of Giant Plants kind of single-handedly allowed Decidueye Vileplume, one of the most successful decks this year, got second at the North American international championships, and this card was kind of the key to unlocking that deck's success, just allowing players to get a turn 1 Decidueye GX, turn 1 Vileplume, extremely strong card. Now, Decidueye decks will have to rely on rare candy. Grass decks will not have that advantage of speed, being able to evolve into whatever stage they would like on the first turn of the game. Number 5, we have Trainer's Mail, also a staple card in that Decidueye Vileplume deck that I had talked about, but was also an excellent card just for helping to create card combinations. Trainer's Mail was used as a consistency crutch in many decks prior to Garbodor from Guardians Rising being released. Before Garbodor, almost every deck played 4 copies, 3 copies of Trainer's Mail just to help draw into those item cards that you needed to find in order to pull off fancy tricks and nice combinations. It was used in Mega decks to find Spirit Links. It was used in Evolution decks to find rare candies, even just to find things like Ultra Balls. It was just an excellent card for helping to piece things together. Really good in Night March last year as well, just to help find your puzzles of time, so you could get 2 puzzles at a time in your hand, play them both at the same time. Trainer's Mail has just been a game-winning card for the last couple years, and now it's finally on its way out. At number 4, we have Hex Maniac. Hex Maniac is just a great card for shutting off opponents' abilities with your supporter for turn. Now, the only ability disruption we have in deck with Silent Lab and Hex Maniac both rotating out in standard format, the only ability disruption we have is that Garbodor from Breakpoint. So now expect Garbodor's play to increase because ability decks are still very strong in standard format. So we are probably going to be expecting an increased play of Garbodor with just as much amount of Field Blower as we have been seeing. Expect a high kind of competition between Garbodor and Field Blower to be happening in standard format without Hex Maniac to lean on to shut off the opponent's abilities. Number 3, we have Lysandre. So many games were won and lost by being able to find that game-winning Lysandre to pull up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, or whiffing that game-winning Lysandre and not being able to access the opponent's bench. Lysandre was a game-changing card when it came into play. I mean, it was printed in Flashfire, but then stayed legal for a little while longer, being printed in Ancient Origins. Now it's finally on the way out. Though we do have Guzma, which is more or less the same effect, being able to pull up the opponent's bench Pokemon, but you do have to switch your active. Lysandre was a very influential card because it replaced Pokemon Catcher in standard format upon its release. Now, Pokemon Catcher used to just be an item card that pulled up the opponent's bench Pokemon automatically, but it was eventually errataed so that you had to flip for it. And the text on the card was eventually printed and changed so that you had to flip to bring up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Lysandre then became the staple card for that effect because you didn't have to flip for it. It was a guarantee. If you got your game-winning Lysandre, you could pull up your opponent's bench Pokemon and knock them out. So, Lysandre, great card. It was in almost every single deck in standard format, and now expect an increase of Guzma. I mean, Guzma's pretty much going to take its place. And with number 2, we have Shaymin EX. Shaymin EX was played as a 2, 3, even a 4 of in so many decks for the last few years. And really, its play didn't start to decrease until finally Tapu Lele was released and Garbodor was released, and those 2 cards kind of slowed down the format. Shaymin was the staple of the Turbo Engine. The Turbo Engine, including Trainer's Mail, Acro Bike was another card that is actually rotating that didn't make my honorables mentions list, and Shaymin EX all made up this Turbo Engine, and the Turbo Engine allowed players to just burn through their decks as quickly as possible to set up. Once Garbodor was released, Garbodor does more damage for each of the items in the opponent's discard pile, so it slowed down and countered this Turbo Engine outright. So decks couldn't afford to play multiple copies of Shaymin EX, Trainer's Mail, Acro Bike like they used to. Players had to adapt and get more creative with how to play around Garbodor, so Shaymin's playability did decrease there in the final stages of its legality. However, Shaymin EX, still a very powerful card. It was used in that Decidueye deck to set up multiple Decidueye as early as possible alongside Forest of Giant Plants. It was also used in my 7th place International Championship Zoroark deck. Set up just an amazing ability, allowing you to fill your hand to 6 cards once per turn without playing a supporter card. Just an amazing card that will definitely be remembered, definitely will still be played in expanded format. So if you do have your Shaymins, make sure to hang on to those because they are definitely going to be good in expanded format. And finally, the #1 card that will be missed upon rotation is VS Seeker. VS Seeker was a staple as soon as it was released in Phantom Forces and continued to be influential because of the secret rare reprint in Roaring Skies. Versus Seeker was a 3 or 4 of in almost every single deck, except for Decidueye Vileplume, of course, because of that Vileplume shutting off items. Didn't really want to play Versus Seeker in that. Otherwise, Versus Seeker was a staple in every single deck. It changed the way people build decks. It changed the way players play. Players could afford to play 1 copy of certain supporters because they could get those copies back with Versus Seeker. You could play Battle Compressor. A couple years ago, there was Battle Compressor. You could Battle Compressor your 1-of supporters away, and you could retrieve them with Versus Seeker. If you had to Sycamore 3 Sycamores on the first turn of the game, it didn't really matter because you had 4 Versus Seeker in deck to allow you to get those Sycamores back throughout the course of the game. Versus Seeker was a game-winning card, just allowing you to get those game-winning teammates, Sycamores, Ends, and Lysandres, just being able to give you 4 extra copies of whatever supporter you needed in every deck was so influential to the way this game has been played. And now that this card is gone, the way the game is played is going to fundamentally change. Players will need to play more copies of supporters. If on the first turn of your game, you need to Sycamore 3 copies of Sycamore, you might lose because you only have 1 more copy of Sycamore left in deck. So players are going to need to adapt to the way that they play their consistency cards. Players are going to be more careful with resource management. If you only have 2 Lysandre in deck or 3 Lysandre in deck and they're all in the discard pile, there's no Versus Seeker to bail you out of that situation. So this is going to be very influential, and I'm excited to see the way the format changes with Versus Seeker out of the format. Personally, I think it's going to make the format much more skilled and much more exciting to play without this crutch to lean on. So, thank you all for checking out my top 10 best rotated cards of 2017. If you would like a more comprehensive list of all the cards that are going to be rotating, all the influential competitive cards that are going to be rotating, check the description below. I'm going to write as many of them as I can out down there. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe, and thank you all for checking it out. Take it easy.